These days, the Pokemon franchise as a whole just feels so bright and shiny. It's certainly a lot more complex than when it came out 20 years ago. That's mostly because when you get an idea, like a franchise starts to take off or a series really gets going, you're going to gain a lot of resources, mostly money. But you also get knowledge and expertise that really carries your idea along, and technology getting better certainly helps, which is why Pokemon used to look like this. You can't really blame it though, because you had to get the idea of battling creatures on a Game Boy screen without color and pretty bulky pixels. So mostly it was on you to use your imagination, which really isn't too hard, but I even want to go further. I want to go to a land before Pokemon where only capsule monsters existed. Also, I realized I just pulled out like 3 90s kids references in 20 seconds, which is pretty cool. But capsule monsters, what is the first thing you think of when you hear capsule monsters? Mostly a really janky Pokemon knockoff, but the thing is, capsule monsters is the original Pokemon, or at least it's what Pokemon was back in 1990. That was how it started, as capsule monsters, but it didn't get any traction from Nintendo until Shigeru Miyamoto stepped in and pitched it to Nintendo. However, with trademarking issues, it eventually became the pocket monsters we know today, but had to be further shortened because of the limitations of the Game Boy. That you can't really write a complex message on a very limited screen like the Game Boy screen, so it had to be shortened to Pokemon. There we go. Now also, Pokemon started because of the Game Boy link cable, interestingly enough. That Satoshi Tajiri, the creator of Pokemon, imagined bugs crawling along the cables, and that's how you get to interact with your friends and capture monsters, and that's where it eventually took off. While it might sound a bit weird that these are the humble beginnings of Pokemon, I mean, bugs crawling around and stuff, it's not really too far-fetched to think about because back in the day, 1990, there wasn't really too much to do except run outside and have fun with your friends, and Japanese culture has a lot on just going out and collecting bugs because it's something to do, and thus Pokemon was born. Also with a little inspiration from Ultraman that used capsules to send out monsters and fight. There we go, we now have an idea, and the cool thing is, there's a lot of old school concept art. But it's this early concept art which was my biggest inspiration for the video, that there's a lot of cool subtleties that eventually became Pokemon, and it's really awesome seeing all of this develop. So let's go and experience that together. First off, Capsule Monsters started off as a manga. That was like one of the big ways of pitching the idea is that, hey, we need to write out this story, we need to show it. And there it is, Game Freak Incorporated, 1990, with the first Capsulemon manga. That's actually pretty cool, and it shows, like, you know, the Pokemon that we know, even the first 151, aren't fully represented here, and that there's all kinds of strange creatures going and battling in styles similar to what we consider Pokemon today. But before we go any further, I want to show you guys the crazy rabbit hole I've gone down to actually get to this point in the video. The idea of the video started from when I was talking about those fake leaks that we've seen, and I wanted resources on official Pokemon concept art. That brought me to this page, which then brought me to this page off of seeing the title for the manga. I also think I discovered the inspiration behind Razbowski's old profile picture. Anyway, let's carry on. So from the manga we can see a picture of a town, and everything looks pretty straightforward. I mean, it looks like the world, I guess it's the Pokemon universe. You just see some kind of monster by the fountain, but that's kind of it. Other than that, like, people walking around, nothing too big to see here. But then the shop and the Pokemon Center, question mark, there's some kind of hotel, so an area where you get to rest and presumably heal up or rest your Pokemon as well, is a little different, but I think the merchant, bit interesting. Some kind of nervous dude with a Pokemon in a cage behind him, and then something in a jar, so items, resources, and just all kinds of weird stuff going on right there. Just kind of shows that Pokemon started off a little more intense than what it ended up becoming. And also, if we want to crack the question of who the first and original Pokemon is, shows to be Rhydon, and this is because of many different reasons. As we've already seen with the concept art, it's generic monsters. We can see Rhydon, Kangaskhan, Nidoran, and even Clefairy to a degree. They're just kind of like spiky monster things. It's like if you're a kid growing up, or you're just trying to like sketch out the rough idea of a monster, this is the idea that you come up with, and we can even see Rhydon, or at least some interpretation of Rhydon, in almost all of the earliest concept arts, from the capsule to the original of the trainer exploring in a cave, and also that guy that's chilling by the fountain. It all seems to be Rhydon, not to mention it being the first index number, which kind of goes along with the creation of the Pokemon. Now, another really interesting thing to bring up is that this is the point where Clefairy was being discussed as being the original mascot for Pokemon. Now, that's kind of nuts to think about, but that was the idea there. However, feedback from, I guess, beta testing, or as Pokemon was starting to get more traction from Nintendo, decided to switch it over to Pikachu to probably make it more appealing to everyone, because the early ideas of Clefairy might have put people off for it just being way too much of a freaky monster game instead of what Pokemon has eventually developed into. Now, there's also some really cool art you guys might not have seen about like size comparisons as well as like Pokemon styles and stuff. We look at Dragonite, its original Pokedex entries are talking about it being as fast as a jet. There was actually like a full page drawing of this, same with Pidgeot being as fast as a plane, and Butterfree not really being too impressive. The size charts are really cool as well, showing like how Ditto, Caterpie, and Eevee are supposed to be really small, and then Kangaskhan all the way up to Onix being very tall and long serpent-like Pokemon, as well as just Snorlax chilling and throwing up the peace symbol. How cool is that? Other Pokemon have also shown some changes and been a lot different throughout their developmental cycles, such as Lapras. I mean, Lapras has already been a Pokemon that you're intended to surf around on and use as some kind of transportation that way, but it looked quite a bit different. Now, Lapras didn't go through a drastic change, but it feels a lot different. Like, there's something very uncanny about this drawing of Lapras into what it eventually became, which is really interesting to think about. We can also see some other Pokemon fighting, kind of bringing this concept across. That Blastoise has gone through some changes, that it had ears and no cannons, and Staryu seems pretty much the same, as well as Slowbro and Ghastly. But Pokemon battles have always been represented throughout the early times of Pokemon, even in the manga, even the concept arts. It's pretty cool to see what we have out of it. Now, it does show, again, the harsher side of Pokemon. Notice how the opposing trainer has a whip. It does bring up a weird thought about how common whips actually are in Pokemon. Like, this isn't some beta concept that got scratched because animal cruelty is some kind of really harsh thing to put in the game. No, we have trainers in the video games using them all the time, like Team Rocket Grunts. But it's not just evil people, you know? Oh, the big bad organization isn't going to use the humane Pokeballs. They're just whipping their Pokemon around because they're bad people. Well, we saw that AJ, he turned out to be a nice guy in the end, but even gym leaders like Sabrina or ace trainers. Then we see like the top tier trainers, you know, they're trying to control very powerful, unruly beasts. So whips are fairly necessary, and that's kind of a crazy thing to consider, that this is one of those older things in Pokemon that actually made it through. We see a lot less of it now, but Pokemon used to be pretty hardcore and brutal. Even looking at Pokemon Special, or the Pokemon Adventures, the first official manga after all the games and stuff were released, there's some hardcore stuff in that. Arbok gets like chopped in half, but it's okay. Arbok can regenerate from that apparently. That guy right there is just gonna be absolutely fine. But there's a lot of death and Pokemon fight scenes and getting scratched up and stuff like that. So it shows that Pokemon's meant to be pretty hardcore, but to gain more traction with larger audiences and starting to become a kid-friendly game, it's really toned down over the years. There's also old concept art for the stat screen and the battle layout. Now, the stat screen doesn't look too different. I guess TP is representative of experience in some way. Hit points are very straightforward, and then you also get a little blurb about stuff. You get to see the stats and the Pokedex number. So I'm wondering if this is either viewing the Pokedex in a way, but at the same time not really. Either way, Pokemon cataloging has been a concept and an idea. But the thing is, number 124, that's Jinx. So we have no idea what this Pokemon is. Kind of became Dragonite, also kind of looks like a Charizard in a way. It was just some kind of placeholder at the same time. Now, the battle screen is something I think, while you just look at it and you think, oh, that was just the early Pokemon battle screen, the Pokemon battle screen has gone through a lot of changes from this, and I think it's all for the best. When you think about this, it looks like an old 2D game that's kind of lazy, where just you have Pokemon left, Pokemon on the right, and then you're battling on a very flat plane, and it doesn't look that exciting. It almost feels like Tamagotchi level of engagement, like there's not a lot of hardware or anything going on, and then the hit point screen is just really flat, you know, that there's nothing really dynamic about it, which is why I'm really happy that they switched to the current iteration of the Pokemon battle screen, that, you know, you see the back of your Pokemon, but you also see the front of your opponent's Pokemon and a little off to the side. That I feel it has a lot to do with the imagination of Pokemon battles and stuff like that, that you're fighting behind your Pokemon, you're calling out attacks to land on that beast on the other side of the field, so it really kind of simulates an arena just by shifting some things around and not having it be some kind of flat, like, blip, pixel flies across the screen, hits, and then the hit points change. Also just kind of changing everything around. The menu seems about the same, but that's really it. So I'm thinking that this change was for the best, and the stats screen, a little different as well. And then I guess the way to wrap up this video will be with unreleased and beta Pokemon, or Pokemon that have been changed, because then we're just starting to get into Pokemon being official and everything that it is. But Kurusu and Honoguma are very interesting Pokemon, I guess, because they were playable. That in the Pokemon Gold and Silver beta, these were the demo starters, and then they faded into nothing, that they were never used, and we don't even know what they represent. We only have speculation, such as maybe an early version of the Teddiursa family, or something that might have had to do with Spiel. That's kind of it. And then we have this strange unnamed creature. This was actually in like official artwork. As you can see, the art design for this unnamed foot spinny top thing, it was around, that it had a nice, really well-defined character art, but it also wasn't really used, but it became Hitmontop, is what it looks like. Just a Pokemon that spins around with feet. Maybe a not as weird design, because that thing is absolutely weird. Then we have some changed Pokemon as well. That when we look at the second generation, this is where we're starting to get more and more of those designs. We have a purple Meryl thing. Meryl ended up becoming blue, bigger ears, scraggly tail, good to go. Now, Girafarig is interesting because the English name for Girafarig is a palindrome, so having a palindrome Pokemon would be pretty cool, but at the same time, it's kind of weird. We have this cat, dog, giraffe mofo here in Pokemon, so I just got a face tail. And yeah, that's the origins of Girafarig. But then I think the most unimpressive is what Quillfish was. We have a spiky pufferfish that became a spiky pufferfish. A bit more personality, I would say, on Quillfish instead of just like a generic child's drawing of a pufferfish. Now, the reason why I put this in the video, because it's just like, why are we talking about second generation Pokemon in this original Pokemon Capsule Monsters video? Well, these are maybe a part of the original 151, kind of. That the first generation of Pokemon was actually supposed to extend beyond 151. That's why there's Ho-Oh in the anime. It's a callback to this because a lot of the concepts for original Pokemon that ended up being put in Gold and Silver were actually intended to be a part of the first generation, but ended up getting spread out or fleshed out a bit more. So that's pretty much what we have for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Kind of a weird video, just the way that it started. One video led to another, and then the deeper I dug into it, the more information we got. I think there's room for just like breaking down every picture a bit more, but then that's over-analysis, and I think that that's a little lame. So just kind of crashed course in Pokemon history that you guys probably didn't know about, since there's some interesting stuff here that even I learned, and I've been digging through Pokemon history and lore and trivia for a very long time. So if you guys enjoyed the video at the very least, if you did, remember to leave a like, comment down below, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.